Hello and good day to you. This is Tracy Harrison from the School of Applied Functional Medicine, and I want to invite all of you to come over and hang out with me a little bit for this month's featured deep dive. Today we are focusing on a topic that many of you have asked for. I actually haven't done a monthly live on this topic in a couple of years. I think it's been 3 years now, but it's a raging concern for all of us as healthcare practitioners and something that comes up over and over and over again with our patients and clients. It is the ubiquitous desire to lose weight. It's a fascinating dynamic, and certainly we could all talk for hours and hours about how individuals, fascinatingly, in our modern Western culture, can be so obsessed not so much with being healthy, but obsessed with body image and wanting to be slimmer, wanting to be firmer, more toned, more muscular, wear a smaller size clothing, especially for women, have smaller waists, smaller hips, less body fat, look better in a bathing suit, in a dress. And we've all had the experience, I'm sure, as practitioners where individuals come to us. I've actually had someone say this to me overtly. I actually don't have time right now to get healthy. That's actually not my goal. I just really want to lose 15 or 20 pounds before my son gets married. I have this great dress. I want to look hot in it. And so I just want help with this desire. And what I think is so particularly fascinating about this is it speaks to the notion of excess body weight, or what most people really mean is excess body fat, as though it's just something cosmetic. I'm changing my hair color, so I want to change my physique, or I want to get plastic surgery and let's just, remove some chunk of tissue, usually largely adipose tissue. Let's just move it somewhere else because it's inconvenient. I don't like it. It's unsightly. It's undesirable. And we're going to jump right into this topic through the functional lens because I've got way more than an hour's worth of things to discuss with you. But what I definitely want to do is offer a warm welcome to all of you and our extended audience here from the School of Applied Functional Medicine. As many of your colleagues are doing here, please do hop on the chat thread and just introduce yourself. Where are you coming to us from? What kind of practitioner are you? What's a particular population or disease dynamic that you're particularly passionate about through the functional medicine lens? And if weight loss is frustrating, overwhelming, a stymieing dynamic in your practice, I want to see a thumbs up or a heart. I think this is something that it's time for us to just be honest with one another about, right? The reality is that body weight and body composition surely is a reflection of our overt lifestyle choices. We're all well familiar with the adage of calories in, calories out. And if you want to lose weight, it's the classic advice, right? It's so often offered even through the conventional medical lens. Eat less, move more. Whew. It's that saccharine guidance that ends up causing a lot of the challenges and frustration that our patients and clients present to us, not because there's not truth in that statement. Of course, there's truth metabolically in that statement, but it is woefully oversimplified. And of course, there's absolutely nothing in that advice or guidance that helps anyone to do anything. My goodness, if just saying eat less and exercise more made a difference, we wouldn't have an epidemic of overweight and obesity in our modern cultures, especially here in the Western world. That doesn't help people know what to do, especially how to make it sustainable, how to make it a way of life rather than a short-term thing they do temporarily. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment because I actually believe that dieting, episodic dieting, is a huge reason. It's a huge contributor to the epidemic of overweight that we see in our practice populations today. But I want to start right away with sharing with you I think the biggest gift that you can give anyone who comes to you in your practice looking for support with weight loss, and that is simply to tell them the truth. I think people tend to become very road weary and demoralized and hopeless and stressed because they've been led to believe that somehow weight loss is easy. Right? Well, if it were easy, there are a lot of determined people out there. I would say we would not be struggling with the massive lack of success that we see in this whole entire arena of health. It's not easy. It's not straightforward. We've got to stop misleading people that there is some quick and easy, down and dirty way to just lose weight and keep it off. And all they have to do is keep shopping for the magic formula, the magic pill, the magic supplement, the magic diet, the magic book, the magic practitioner. We've got to stop misleading people and telling them this, highly desirable but false premise. The reality is that by and large, the people who are in our practices who are struggling with overweight and obesity are experiencing that because they've been making lifestyle choices that have been promoting it for quite some time. And there are both physiological and biochemical dynamics entrenched in place that the body has become adapted to. And if you want the body to give you a different outcome, you've got to give it a different input for a long enough period of time, consistently enough that the body experiences a new normal, is willing to believe you that that's a new normal and adapts to it. And there's nothing easy about that. And so I think we've got to stop bullshitting people and tell them the truth that they can absolutely be successful. We want to inspire them with that possibility, but that it's not quick and easy, down and dirty, just looking for the correct best-selling solution. The reality is that so often the body is displaying excess body fat on purpose in response to other non-metabolic, other dynamics in the body. And I think in order to really understand the most common patterns at play in creating with this, we first have to embrace one simple truth. That today we may think excess body fat is undesirable, unsightly, unpopular, and we know it can also promote disease, especially when a person moves from being just slightly overweight, which might be metabolically not an issue, to being truly obese, in which case this excess adipose tissue starts to become pro-inflammatory in and of itself, and then starts to create this cascade, right, where inflammation promotes more body fat and body fat promotes inflammation, and we develop a vicious cycle. But in general, the reality is we don't like the excess body fat. But as far as your body's evolutionary wisdom is concerned, excess body fat, adipose tissue, is a form of protection. It is metabolic fuel, insurance against an uncertain future. Because today, food is ubiquitous, at least here in the Western world. Certainly there are people who have trouble accessing sufficient calories and nutrients, but that's not the normal, typical experience here in the Western world. By and large, calories are available everywhere. 7x24 in all sorts of different forms. All sorts of different foods are available out of season. And in particular, some of the least healthy foods are super cheap. Buy one, get one free. Delivered through a to-go window, right? High concentration of super cheap, hypercaloric, hyperchemical laden, nutrient deficient foods that can be pro-inflammatory, are certainly not particularly nourishing, and can certainly be obesogenic because they promote some of the hormone imbalances that I'll get to in just a moment, especially insulin resistance. But the reality is, for a long, long time, humans needed to navigate food as an uncertain resource. You might eat, you might feast, you might find an apple tree, or you might kill an animal and feast for a period of time. You might find a cache of root vegetables, right? And you might feast as much of that as you can get, but then you might necessarily have to fast for a period of time. Not because you think fasting is a good idea, but because food isn't available. And so the human body has evolved for way, 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 way longer than this so short modern window during which we now understand quite a bit of metabolic science. For millennia, for eons, we have evolved having natural, not only daily or weekly, but seasonal cycles of eating and fasting. And in fact, I think it's fair to say that all of us sitting here today having this conversation likely come from genes that are particularly effective at making sure that we fatten up nicely during times when food is plentiful so that we can have increased body fat and then live off of fatty acid oxidation of that body fat during lean times, during the winter where food is incredibly scarce, where people may not eat for days and days. And so in this sense, we would fatten up during the food-rich times, especially during the later summer and into the autumn. And then we would progressively burn that fuel during the winter time, and then coming into a time where we can again begin to intake higher levels of food as we come into the spring. And so from an evolutionary viewpoint, body fat is protection. Body fat is helpful. Body fat ensures survival. And as we so often talk about at the School of Applied Functional Medicine, your body is taking a lot of cues and clues about the status of your world and how certain survival is based on your environment. Your body is eavesdropping on your thoughts, your reactions to your day-over-day environment, anything from your relationships to your job, to your self-talk and your mindset, the food you eat, how stressed you are, the level of simmering infectious dynamics or toxins you might be navigating, the level of nutrients versus calories that you're bringing in. Your body is constantly taking cues and clues on the status of your world and whether or not your nervous system should be primarily trying to protect you in the mode of ensuring survival, which is what the sympathetic nervous system does, or whether the body generally sees that survival appears to be assured, so we will shift the entire systemic physiology from a pro-survival sympathetic nervous system mode into the highly desired, designed to be our default, parasympathetic nervous system mode, right? The body generally is not going to activate both of those dynamics at the same time as a way of life. We're either fighting, flighting, and hiding in the name of survival, in which case the body is going to prioritize very specific hormone balances, neural transitions, glandular secretions, muscle contractions, all in a symphony of coordinated physiological response to ensure survival. Right? But that very same physiological orchestration is not going to promote thriving. So what is so interesting is that people often come to us living the typical modern Western life, right? What are they doing? They're eating a lot of crap food. As I said before, lots of calories, lots of chemicals, lots of good marketing, lots of super cheap ingredients with chemically enhanced flavors and textures and sweeteners and preservatives. All in the name of making super cheap, highly subsidized ingredients as palatable as possible, and ideally engineered with regard to affecting your dopamine serotonin balance so that you really can't eat just one. By virtue of affecting a neurotransmitter balance, we become addicted to these foods when we self-medicate with various foods in order to affect our moods. But we're consuming a lot of crap food. We really are. And unfortunately, because of a lot, at least here in the United States, foods that are subsidized based on federal regulation are cheap and readily available to make this widespread big food type of industry where a very small subset of ingredients are combined in all sorts of chemical laden permutations to fill our grocery stores. Again, with lots of chemicals, lots of calories, but not a lot of nutrients. And we say at SAFM all the time, right? We don't have storage for long-term storage for a lot of nutrients in the body. There's no pantry in your left butt cheek where you can just go to get a little more vitamin A or a little more zinc or a little more methionine or a little more glycine, right? Or a little more astaxanthin, right? When it could be beneficial. No, what you don't literally bring in from food, or secondarily maybe via supplement, you literally become deficient in, and then biochemical processes become impaired, slowly but surely, progressively. Food quality matters hugely, and in the modern Western world, we're consuming a lot of crap food. We are also, so the body is taking cues, right, based on the nutrient density of our intake. The body is also paying attention to toxicity, right? Is your world safe? Keeping in mind that the immune system is not just responding to potential microbial threats, right? The body is also responding to anything that might be identified as both stranger and danger. And toxins, chemicals, are not endogenous substances, right? They are threats. And the immune system, to varying degrees, depending on the priming of a given person, is having a pro-inflammatory reaction to a lot of substances that we bring on board. And this is on top of, to whatever degree those substances are separate from the immune system, interfering with the biochemistry of the body, such as we know things like phthalates in different plastics, right, can change the normal endocrine balance in the body. Or certain heavy metals can interfere with the activity of enzymes needed to drive cellular respiration in the mitochondria of nearly every cell in the human body. Toxins have an overt effect not only biochemically, but also from a pro-inflammatory perspective. And here's the thing. We're inhaling toxins, we're swallowing toxins, but you've heard me speak before. I'm particularly passionate about the toxins we slather all over our bodies on purpose in the name of beauty and personal hygiene. Because the reality is, scientifically, you're a lot better protected from things that you put in your mouth and swallow, because you've got all sorts of different digestive processes. You've got the protection of the microbiome. You've got the protection of 2/3 of the immune cells in the gut. And then what you do digest and absorb goes for hepatic clearance immediately before the systemic body is exposed to what you take in through your mouth. But what you slather on your skin, you're exposed to. The skin is a semi-permeable membrane. Otherwise, why would an Epsom salt bath work? Why would we use transdermal hormones, right? Of course, the skin is a semi-permeable membrane, but we have here in the US at least way lower thresholds of regulatory restrictions about toxicity allowed in things you spread on your skin, like makeup, like moisturizers, like bug spray, like shampoo, conditioners, hair gel. God, there are just so many different kinds of makeup to consider. Deodorants, antiperspirants, colognes, perfumes, my goodness, the aftershave, shaving cream, soaps. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And most people would be shocked to realize the overt toxicity that is included even in supposedly natural brands of personal hygiene and beauty products. But I believe in telling it to our patients what it really is. You shouldn't put anything on your skin that you're not willing to eat. Yeah, you really shouldn't, because it is an overt source of toxicity. It's a source of inflammation, and anything that promotes inflammation is going to promote physiological and biochemical stress, and stress promotes weight gain. And we need to start teaching our patients and clients. So I talked about crap food. Absolutely can promote obesity, promote overweight. And I'm going to get to some mechanism in just a second, but not only because of caloric excess, but refined carbohydrates and excessive carbohydrates and sugars and sweeteners. But the chemicals that are in those foods, the chemicals that are in our personal hygiene and beauty products can directly also impair our metabolism via multiple mechanisms. So crap food, toxins, but then let's talk about stress. If there's one category that's promoting the obesity epidemic, I really believe it's stress. And it's not just emotional stress, which is a huge problem, right? When we think about the modern Western society that's about go, do, more, better, faster, now. Never measuring up, never being satisfied. You go and do and go and do, and you don't take vacation, and you don't rest, and you don't have sleep, and you don't actually have full rejuvenation because you got to go and make more money. But to have more money to buy things that you don't take enough time off to use them to enjoy yourself in the first place, which is crazy. And social media and, current fear mongering and a lot of the other social dynamics we're experiencing in the current pandemic are only making all of this worse. We deprioritize sleep instead of what? Video games? Mind numbing? I don't know, more Seinfeld reruns? Most people, most people, except for maybe the truly very young and the truly elderly, because I like to say both of them are more in touch with their innate wisdom. But everybody else in between, sleep is one of those things we tend to deprioritize until we absolutely can't stand it, right? Till we're falling asleep. Or we've created so much stress that the body doesn't think it's safe to sleep. One of the number one things the body purposefully prevents when you're living in a sympathetic dominant nervous system activation is sleep. But not because the body's working against us, because if you're truly fighting, flighting, and hiding for your life, you could die if you sleep. And this is important evolutionary wisdom that we need to explain to patients and clients. When you don't sleep very well, your cortisol the following morning is naturally elevated. Your blood sugar the next day is naturally elevated. If you do that day after day, after month, after year, you will have insulin resistance, even if you eat a perfect diet, because diet is not the only thing affecting blood sugar. In fact, I would argue that stress hormones are a much more dramatic mediator of chronic elevation of blood sugar even than diet, and increasingly so in high fear types of cultural dynamics like what we've been experiencing today. And it's a good reminder that it's not just about diet, right? If people believe that they're somehow going to address their diet, but keep joking about their stress, keep tolerating their stress, keep seeing stress as a badge of honor, something to defend, something that makes them a martyr, right? It's not going to be sustainable, and they're going to have minimal results in having ease around sustaining their weight, because even though their diet might change, their nervous system is not listening to the justifications that they tell themselves and their family and friends about their stress. Your mind is not fooled by all of the justifications and the smoke screens that we put up about the real source of stress of our life. Right? Your nervous system is in your body. It knows your source of stress. You're not going to fake it out or fool it, right? It's eavesdropping on your self-talk. It knows what you're saying to yourself. It knows your fears. It knows your real sense of security or not. It knows your real sense of happiness or not. It knows your sense of ease and trust or not. It knows whether you're hypervigilant. So if we want to do something about chronic elevated stress hormones, which naturally promote elevated blood sugar, we got to start getting serious about our stresses and stop joking about it. Stop competing about levels of stress and actually do something about reducing them. We've got to start overtly introducing mindfulness activities and stress reduction choices, especially in the current cultural environment. Things like gratitude journaling and yoga and going for easeful walks, listening to relaxing music, cuddling, snuggling with a pet, right? These kinds of things that can naturally help. A mechanism for reducing stress hormones that I find is largely accessible for most people is mindful breathing. Things like box breathing, right? Or 178 type of mindful breathing where you purposefully have a slow mindful exhale, or box breathing where there is a pause in between breaths, because the nervous system is paying attention to our breathing patterns as evidence of whether we are stressed out, whether we're fighting, flighting, and hiding for our lives. If you're running for your life, trust me, you don't have an opportunity to have long, slow exhales. or to pause mindfully in between breaths. And so this is a way where you can improve heart rate variability, you can reduce your blood pressure, you can reduce your pulse, and you can overtly reduce stress hormones. And so stress is a huge mediator of metabolic imbalance and a huge mediator of obesity and overweight via multiple mechanisms. So crap food, toxins, and stress, man, they are not sexy biochemical mechanisms. They're foundational, but they are huge blocks to our patients and clients being able to find sustainable lifestyle habits that can help to make naturally lower body fat percentages, naturally lower body weights sustainable, rather than being some plan or some short-term effort they go and do. If the human body believes that your survival is unassured, that it needs to purposefully bring on board more adipose tissue to protect you from metabolic uncertainty, it is going to do it, and it's going to fight really hard to do it. Even if you eat less, it's still going to do it. Because the human body, our physiology, our genetics is still here with us, thriving today, because it's been very successful at protecting us against metabolic uncertainty for eons. And it's not easily faked out. And yeah, you can go on some kind of diet plan and fake out your body in order to force it to lose weight. But here's the thing, what I think we can understandably say based on the science is that one of the most effective ways to be sure to gain weight is to go on a diet. Because yo-yo dieting, where you go on some plan temporarily and you lose weight, if you look at the data, right, at least 80% of people looking across multiple years who lose weight gain back what they lost, and in an alarmingly large number of cases, they gain back more than they lost in the first place. So you go on a diet, you go on some temporary plan, you lose 10, but you end up gaining back 12. You go on another diet, you lose 15, but you gain back 20, right? You go on another diet, you lose 21, but you gain back 30. And this yo-yo bouncing is happening because of the state of stress that the body is experiencing through the yo-yo experiences that over time are reducing our basal metabolic rate. It is a form of stress to the human body. And so this is a powerful, powerful tool to help people understand. Anytime a person thinks, I'm going to go do some short-term plan and lose weight and then go back to what I was doing that the body naturally responded to by making me fatter, it's illogical to think I've got this issue now. This is what the body's giving me as output from my input. But somehow I'm going to go over here and do this temporary plan and force a shift. And then after what? 2 weeks, 2 months, 9 months, a year? Then I'm going to return to my normal. And somehow the body is going to keep the results from that input, even when I change it back to the old one. Folks, that's dumb. It's illogical. It doesn't make sense. That's like saying 1 + 1 is 2. But I'm going to come over here and fake my body into thinking that 1 + 3 is 4, right? But then I'm going to take away and go back and say, but 1 + 1 should still equal 4, right? It doesn't work that way. The body is showing us through its behavior what its believed best response is as an outcome to the inputs that we're giving it. If you want to lose weight and keep it off, you can't go on anything. You got to change your life and sustain it. And so I'm going to talk about hormonal patterns in just a second, but I just want to say a brief word about the challenge of sustaining. The reality is that you can indeed pick up a whole bunch of books, pick up some best-selling plan, some diet plan, and you can force the body to lose some amount of weight against its will. And that's, I think, is the important part to understand. It is against its will. It is giving you that as a short-term outcome. But as soon as you give it enough fuel to respond more objectively to your environment, it's going to go back to what it believes it needs to do to protect you. It's not doing it because the body's against you. right? We have a whole bunch of people that somehow think the body is against me. My body's failed me. It's not supporting my goals. It's letting me down. It's not reliable. We've got to tell folks the truth. The body is doing this because it believes you need protecting. And if you don't need protecting, you've got to start communicating and convincing your body through your choices, and in particular through your thoughts, that you don't need protecting. But if you keep making the same old signals that make your body believe protection is necessary, it's going to keep on trying to protect you. Really important truth to bring people back to the wisdom of the body, and that the body is actually with us, trying to best support us at all times. And so sustaining weight loss is where it's at, my friends. It's actually easy to temporarily lose some weight, but sustaining weight loss is the rub, right? Because most people, I mean, there's certainly some people, I've had people tell me, I just need to fit into this dress. I just want to look great in my swimsuit on vacation, right? I'm going to get married. I just want to be trimmer for it. And then if I gain weight, I don't really care. Okay. I think we need to start telling people the truth that the body doesn't actually like it when you do that. One of the things that often happens when we lose weight is we mobilize toxins. And I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. And we can actually, when we are losing weight, if we're not appropriately supporting the body's detoxification pathways, you can actually notably increase inflammation and therefore increase stress, which also has a huge impact on how the body bounces back and seeks to regain that weight again. But in terms of not just losing weight, but keeping it off, we need to understand that people don't just need help from us with understanding root causes. Like maybe there's insulin resistance, maybe there's a thyroid issue, maybe there's insufficient androgens, right? Not enough testosterone, or maybe there's androgen dominance. Maybe there's too much testosterone, too much dihydrotestosterone, right? For example, that's creating anovulation, which sets up estrogen dominance, which is one of the hormone pathways that can promote overweight. There may be biochemical and physiological dynamics that you can get really educated on and teach and inspire and empower your client to address those. But when we think about people needing to sustain a new way of life, the reality is that all of the different choices in their day-to-day experience are contributing to their prior reality as an obese person. And so this is not just about a thyroid hormone dosage or whether they eat pizza 4 times a week or not, right? Their shopping habits, the places they like to eat out, the eating habits of their friends, the stress habits of their friends, their sleep habits, their personal hygiene product choices. All of these things are part of their normal. And if you don't help to educate and inspire and empower them to hang out with thin people as opposed to hanging out with a whole bunch of obese people, our lifestyle habits become those of the people, the 5 or 6 people we spend the most time with. It's like asking a drug addict or an alcoholic to just stop drinking, stop taking the drugs, but change nothing else about your life and you'll sustain the habit. No, you won't. Because we naturally cleave to the cultural norms around us. And while there's a larger country or community or neighborhood type of culture dynamics, our lifestyle choices naturally become like those of the people we spend the most time with. And if people are used to spending a whole bunch of time with people who are crazy sedentary, I spend a whole bunch of time with people who pig out on sweets, people who self-medicate with chips, people who stay up late at night and rant on social media and deprioritize sleep, right? If they continue to keep the same community, the same cultural habits, they will eventually return to that sense of normalcy. And this is why health coaching and health education and lifestyle empowerment, as my friend Pilar Gerasimo likes to call it in her awesome new book, The Healthy Deviant. We have to teach people how to begin step by step to lock in new sustainable lifestyle habits. Because otherwise, they will eventually slowly and progressively morph back to what's comfortable, what's normal, what causes them to not stand out. Unless we call a spade right up front and say, look, being normal means eventually getting diabetes. That's what that means, friends. We got to stop acting like getting type 2 diabetes is some crazy abnormality that happens out of the blue. It's not. It's the natural default. If you act normal in American culture, if you eat the normal diet and experience the normal lifestyle flow and the normal stress and the normal toxicity, you probably already have insulin resistance, and it's just a matter of time before you get type 2 diabetes. That's normal. It's expected. It is the default. And so, yeah, if you want a different life experience, you got to find a way to get comfortable up front with being weird, with being abnormal. You got to prepare yourself for the reality that you're going to make choices that are different from others. You got to be willing to stand out at least a little bit. You got to get comfortable with the fact that as you make different choices and get better results, the people around you, for some crazy reason that continues to fascinate me, are going to find the need to criticize your choices, even though you're not pushing them on them. They've got their choices, you've got your choices. You're both happy doing your thing, but when they see you making different choices, somehow it reflects poorly in their mind on their choices, so they have the need to criticize you, which is hilarious to me. But it's a common thing, right? Why are you eating those weird foods? Why are you doing these weird things? How come you're not drinking with us? How come you're not doing this? How come you're not doing that? We've got to prepare folks for the fact that choosing to be healthy in our culture in the Western world means being weird. And you got to find a way to navigate that. You got to find a way to create new community, at least a few new friends, someone to have with kindred spirits to navigate this different reality moving forward. Because if you don't, and you continue to feel isolated and alone and criticized and standing out and maybe ostracized, just a little too much attention, my experience clinically is that even if people are having amazing health results, they can't handle the pressure. They can't necessarily handle that standing out. And they got to get comfortable with being some kind of degree of weird. And part of our education, part of health care needs to include this particular critical aspect of not just getting well, but staying well. Because if all we're doing, my friends, through the functional medicine lens is helping people get well and then just standing around waiting the week or the month or the year before they get sick again, and then they come back and we talk about the same old things and they fix it again, and we wait, and then the revolving door disease, and they come back and they're sick again and they get well and they're sick again and they get well and they're sick again. It's the revolving door of disease. How much value is that? It's greater than zero, but I would argue it's probably not the fulfillment. It's not the calling that all of you went into healthcare initially in order to help create in the patients you're passionate for serving, right? We don't want to just help people get well. We want to help people stay well. All right, so I'm going to shift from lifestyle things. I want to talk about some biochemistry. So these are the most common hormonal patterns that you are going to see. And I talk about this all the time in our courses, and in particular our cases at SAFM. It's funny how anatomically or even physiologically we may still hearken back to the notion that, the brain is in charge, right? The brain is running the body. Not so much. I think you could actually make a much stronger argument that the microbes are in charge, and the microbes, via their presence, via their excretions, and keep in mind, microbes are secreting an awful lot of things, including hormones and neurotransmitters and nutrients and all sorts of inflammatory mediators. Are having a huge controlling impact on the orchestration of the human body. And it's actually via the hormones that we are orchestrating the response, including the metabolic response across the entire human physiology. And so if you want to look for the common patterns that naturally would create overwhelm or obesity in your patients, first of all, number one, I would have you look for insulin resistance. And the number one thing we've got to stop doing is waiting for insulin resistance to get to the third or fourth stage, which is where blood sugar actually starts to go up at all, and then diagnosing it like it just started and calling it pre-diabetes or even pre-diabetes or whatever other newfangled label you want to put on it. The reality is insulin resistance has frequently begun years, if not decades, before we actually see the metabolic dysfunction become so pervasive as to show up as elevated blood sugar. Initially, the glycemic load of the life between stress and diet has been pushing on the pancreas for a long time, and the pancreas is responding by inputting out increasingly larger levels of insulin. And so hyperinsulinemia will precede insulin resistance and certainly overt hyperglycemia, often by years. But if you're not checking fasting insulin, you're not going to see that. And in fact, even when hyperinsulinemia is continuing and that fasting insulin is building up over time as an anticipated response to manage the high glycemic load of the life, even as fasting insulin gets higher and higher, right, even within the normal range, understand that the first impact on blood sugar is going to be unexpectedly low blood sugar. You're going to see a pattern of hypoglycemia, right? Maybe an unexpected pattern of hypoglycemia, like a fasting glucose of 72. And someone who eats a standard American diet. That should really raise a red flag in your mind because there's nothing normal about that at all. But if you were to check fasting insulin, you would probably find that it's in the upper half, upper third of the reference range, maybe even clinically high. And this is where you start to see reactive or postprandial hypoglycemia because fasting insulin is high and the pancreas is like, no, I got you. I'm putting a lot out there because I know you're going to keep living this life that you've asked me to adapt to that has a high glycemic demand. We've got to start getting in front of this crazy epidemic. We're waiting way, way too long to diagnose anything at all. We're not looking at the full set of appropriate markers, and we're certainly not looking at glycemic variability even, right? We've got to start looking at not even just fasting insulin. We've got to even take it beyond that and start looking at things like C-peptide. But at least we should be looking at fasting insulin as a starting point. But we've got to get up front. Insulin resistance is truly epidemic. And even before blood sugar is effective, hyperinsulinemia is having cardiovascular effects that set the stage for metabolic syndrome. And hyperinsulinemia promotes obesity all by itself. All by itself. Even before blood sugar is affected in a quote unquote bad way at all. So insulin resistance is something we need to be looking for. The second thing, and I would say just as common, especially in women, maybe even more common, is cellular hypothyroid function. We've got to get beyond thinking TSH is an overt and reliable marker of systemic sufficiency of thyroid hormone. That's just false. I can't even tell you. In fact, we've looked at 2 this week. The number of cases, hundreds and hundreds of cases, where if you look at TSH, it's 0.9, 1.6, 2.1. 2.02, right? If you looked at TSH, you would go, fine, you're fine, there's no thyroid problem. But if you ran a full thyroid panel, you would see all sorts of other scenarios. You might find autoimmune thyroiditis with elevated levels of antithyroglobulin or antithyroperoxidase enzymes. That's impairing the level of T4 thyroid hormone actually being made in the thyroid, right? And remember that autoimmune diseases in generally aren't like full-on chronic and stable. They happen in flares. And so if you want to see autoimmune flare, you got to grab your labs in the middle of a flare, right? If you grab the labs when everything seems fine, it's probably going to look fine because you're not in a flare. But I would argue that what's actually way more common, even in women, as much as everyone's really excited now about, oh my gosh, Hashimoto's is so common. And it is way more common than acknowledged through the conventional medical lens. Even more common than that is poor T4 to T3 thyroid hormone conversion. And this is something that barely happens in the thyroid. That's unlike T4, right, which is made almost entirely in the thyroid. T4 to T3 conversion is a peripheral conversion that happens in a whole bunch of tissues, like the intestines, the small intestines, like the liver, like the kidneys. And it requires nutrients like iron and zinc and selenium. We have to get that T4 thyroid hormone into our cells, right? We're measuring levels of hormones in the serum, assuming that that's representative of what's getting into the cells, which may or may not be true, which is why sometimes people present with raging patterns of hypothyroid symptoms, but the labs look okay. And we make the tragic mistake of going with the labs over the person's overt presentations from a symptomatic perspective, right? There's thyroid hormone resistance. There is a lot that happens intracellularly, right? Some of the thyroid hormone conversion enzymes happen intracellularly. You're not measuring them in the serum. So we can have impaired T4 to T3 conversion because of insufficient nutrients, which could be because of insufficient intake, like not enough zinc and maybe a vegan client, not enough iron in someone who's anemic, maybe because they have heavy menstrual cycles. We could have stress-mediated poor conversion of T4 to T3, where the body, by design, converts T4 into the metabolically inactive reverse T3, again, as a way of preserving metabolism against an uncertain future, right? Where because of stress, the body is turning down your metabolism on purpose so you don't die. So that when you really need to run and hide and fight, you have conserved body fat. You have conserved metabolism for that purpose. So stress can directly impair the conversion of T4 to T3 by shunting a lot of T4 into reverse T3. And then reverse T3 impairs the receptor function for T3 being able to drive thyroid effects intracellularly. Is a huge issue. But even on top of that, there are multiple different families of inflammatory cytokines that directly impair T4 to T3 conversion. This is where inflammation purposefully impairs metabolism. So different interleukins like IL-6, for example, which is highly associated with lipopolysaccharide, coming from our microbial friends, and we can have a particularly strong immune system reaction to lipopolysaccharide when there's enhanced intestinal permeability, and or when there's a strong overgrowth in the gut microbiome, like we see in like a SIBO type of dynamic, or when there's immunosuppression because of stress. But surges of pro-inflammatory cytokines interfere with the action of enzymes that convert T4 to T3 on purpose. So if you want the thyroid to work optimally, we need to address the root causes for why the body on purpose is impairing this function. So the reality is, let me come full circle. The way to lose weight and to sustain weight loss with the greatest ease is to address the root causes of systemic disease and imbalance. And then the body will naturally choose a lower level of hypervigilance, a different hormone balance, a different level of basal metabolic rate, and allow the body to naturally lose weight because the body feels feels a lesser need to protect you against the environment in which you are asking it to live. And through the functional medicine lens at SAFM, we teach our practitioners to tell people the truth, that sustainable weight loss is absolutely achievable. But the most reliable way to do that is to understand up front that weight loss through the body's wisdom will be one of the very last benefits to come from a symptom relief perspective by sustainably getting rid of the root causes of disease. And so in this sense, if someone has irritable bowel syndrome, or someone has insulin resistance, or someone has lupus, or Hashimoto's, or Crohn's disease, or asthma, or osteoarthritis, or, chronic viral overload, or any of these dynamics, if you will address the dis-ease mechanisms first, weight loss will often be an unintended side effect, because the body will give it to you on purpose, because it starts to see that your survival, your thriving is better assured, and it will naturally choose to keep less metabolic reserves against an uncertain future. Part of that, again, is about mental emotional stress and imbalance, but there's a huge piece with regard to biochemical and inflammatory dynamics physiologically in the body. So I've mentioned hypothyroid, I've mentioned insulin resistance. The third piece is estrogen dominance. And I want to bust some myths here. We got lots of other videos here on our site that you can look at if you want to explore some of these other topics as a focused dive. Estrogen dominance is rampant. And it is not because ovaries just go wild and go crazy and start making off the deep end levels of estrogen for sport. The body's biochemistry is not that dysregulated. However, what can happen for sure is we can end up with impairments in the metabolism and clearance of estrogen and estrogenic metabolites of endogenous estrogens, where we may have impaired methylation or impaired sulfation, and this leaves a stronger estrogenic effect. We may have issues with microbial overgrowths in the gut that directly interfere with the body's ability to excrete estrogen metabolites in the stool, and we keep reabsorbing those estrogen metabolites, creating a continuous buildup of estrogenic effect in the body. And way more common than that is the effect of those toxins. I'm sure you're all familiar with the notion of chemicals serving as endocrine disruptors. And this is multifactorial, where some chemicals look enough like a hormone that they actually fit into receptors and directly drive hormonal effects. More importantly, a lot of chemicals change the behavior of estrogen receptors. Other chemicals can interfere with or shift hormone metabolism down pathways that are more likely to be pro-inflammatory or more likely to be carcinogenic. And so this is where toxins are affecting our body's detoxification ability. And it's a good reminder that detoxification is not just about clearing chemicals, right? Exogenous chemicals. We need good, strong, prolific, balanced detoxification in order to break down endogenously produced substances so that they don't build up and have unintended disease-promoting effects. But estrogen dominance is a big deal, especially because of poor clearance and detox and because of the effects of endocrine-disrupting chemicals. But the other thing that is a synergistic effect between all the patterns that I mentioned is that when a person has either a chronic exposure to xenoestrogenic chemicals and or high levels of insulin, because of a high glycemic load from stress and diet, either of those dynamics can promote poor ovulatory behavior in the ovaries. And so we end up maybe with anovulatory cycles. What's actually way more common is suboptimal ovulation, right? With the level of progesterone reached from ovulation is not a black or white. It's either nothing or optimal. There's a whole spectrum of progesterone levels, even before the perimenopausal years. And so we know that estrogen and progesterone are necessary to balance one another. And so when people end up with suboptimal ovulation, then good, normal, optimal levels of estrogen can end up promoting estrogen dominance because there's not enough progesterone to counter those estrogenic effects and balance them. And so this is a really insidious type of dynamic and brings us back to stress reduction and reducing or getting rid of added sugars and sweeteners and refined carbohydrates, reducing stress to bring down fasting insulin, and then addressing toxicity, especially as it relates to personal hygiene and beauty products, but overall chemical intake and exposure. Both of those support better systemic hormone balance that naturally leads to lower levels of overweight and obesity. So it's a little bit of a sort of biochemical kind of deep dive dynamic there specifically that can be at play. I've got two other dynamics I want to cover with you, but I know some of you here at the top of the hour are going to need to duck away, and I want to say thank you for joining me today. This is a topic that, as you can tell, I can do a 6-hour webinar on, and we have multiple clinical courses at the School of Applied Functional Medicine that dive into the thyroid piece, or the sex hormone piece, or the adrenal and the stress piece, and the toxicity piece. But today, I want to give away 5 free seats specifically for our metabolic dysfunction and reversing diabetes clinical course. And all of you who are participating today are eligible to enter a drawing, a small one with really high odds, to win a free seat in this clinical course. No catch, no pitch, just a free class. And so the way to do that is to enter our drawing, not here, but on our website. All you have to do is go to the link that my team is posting right now in order to enter one comment on a particular pearl that you learned today, something you found really interesting or helpful. You only have to enter once. Multiple entries will not increase your chances of winning, and all comments are moderated, so you won't see them pop up right away. But just enter once, and my team will do a random drawing tomorrow morning and give away 5 free seats for this particular clinical course as a way of enhancing your clinical knowledge and your scientific awareness of the interconnectedness of overweight and obesity. So just our gift to you to say thank you for participating and joining us today. You don't have to do that right now. You just have to do it by midnight Eastern time tonight. In this way, our friends on the other side of the world who are fast asleep right now will have the opportunity to experience this recording and enter the drawing after they wake up to enjoy the day tomorrow. So you do have some time to enter the drawing. But what I want to ask all of you, if you do need to go, please consider sharing this broadcast with your community. As you can tell, this is all about just trying to give you some increased education, inspiration, awareness, and empowerment as a healthcare practitioner. This is just our public service to our larger community of healthcare practitioners here at the School of Applied Functional Medicine. And I want as many people as possible hearing these types of messages and questioning, taking a keen look at how they're practicing, getting empowered around going to do research, going to do investigations. Whether they get inspired to join us here at SAFM or some of our other wonderful colleague schools, we're in wonderful company here in advanced training through the functional medicine lens. I just want to inspire all healthcare practitioners to expand their horizons in looking at not just how do you treat disease, but how do you actually get to the root causes biochemically, physiologically, behaviorally. So that the disease dynamics actually get reversed, and you don't have to manage anything. You don't have to deal with the long-term effects of drugs because you make the dynamics of the disease go away. And in this way, the body naturally finds a better balance. I do want to say a word real quickly about food intake. because some of you were asking me about dietary suggestions. And I appreciate deeply I've jumped all over the place, because indeed I would need to give you a 6-hour webinar in order to cover in detail all the topics I've spoken of today. But I just want to give you a taste so that you can go and explore. But right here on our SAFM fan page in Facebook, you can find a whole video on insulin. You can find a whole video on thyroid. You can find a whole video on estrogen, right? You can find a whole video on the insidious effects of stress, right? So I hope that you use today's session as an impetus to keep looking, keep diving, right? Keep exploring and raising your scientific and your clinical knowledge. But I want to talk about food. And then I will want to talk about food. I want to talk about fasting. So foods, calorie restriction as an ongoing lifestyle has definitely been shown to improve insulin resistance and to improve metabolic functioning, to activate all sorts of anti-aging, I don't like that term, but basically anti-inflammatory, cell healing promoting pathways like sirtuin, right? The multiple different pathways. But the reality is, how many people in your practice are going to get all excited about adopting calorie restriction as a new permanent lifestyle habit, right? You got a whole laundry list of people just waiting to cut their daily calorie intake by 700 calories. I don't know about you, but certainly with people who are today following normal Western lifestyle choices, that's not something most people are jumping up and down to pursue. Because talk about an abnormal lifestyle choice, right? Most people are afraid of hunger. Most people are afraid of not being able to nourish themselves, right? It's amazing how fearful we are of hunger. What I actually find is much more doable, approachable for the average person who is looking to begin to make a shift that can promote better overall metabolic functioning, is actually increasing the number of hours overnight that they have as a fasting window. Right? The average person we serve is not prepared to weather well a multi-day fasting. So I do not recommend that. I actually think that can be dangerous because extended windows of fasting dramatically can mobilize toxin load, toxin circulation. And if people's detox pathways are not being adequately supported, that can actually be dangerous. But what I think can be actually really quite helpful is teaching people to begin to increase the amount of time between when they finish their day's food before they go to bed. So start nice and easy. Maybe they're used to munching all night long. Okay, start with finish whatever food you're eating 2 whole hours before you go to bed. And then after they attain that, stretch it to 3 hours. And then after they attain that, flip it up on the other side. Okay, instead of having breakfast at 6 a.m., have breakfast at 7 a.m. Step by step, in a gradual, achievable way, begin to expand the overnight fasting window so that it can go from 10 hours to 12 hours, maybe eventually up to 14 hours. But this is something I find is really quite approachable for most people. And maybe in the beginning it doesn't become something they do all the time. Maybe they just do it 2 days a week. Okay, great. 2 days a week is so much better than nothing. Let's celebrate the crap out of that, right? Step by step, slow and steady wins the race. And if we try and recommend to people too much of an initial jump, they will feel it's overwhelming, too hard for them. It's not about not believing you and whether it'll work. They may totally give you all the props. Like, I hear you, it'll work. That's too hard for me. I can't do that. I got too much going on. I'll be hungry. I'll be weak. I won't sleep well. It's not going to work, right? Too quick to push it away because we're recommending too much too fast rather than being flexible, listening keenly to where they are and what their fears are, and working with them to find something that they can feel excited about doing. So I think that is the best place to start. And then internal to the eating window during the day, does it help also if they allow a nice longer window between their meal episodes? Yes, if they don't, if they aren't in the throes of the first or second stage of metabolic dysfunction where they're prone to hypoglycemia. It's so much better to work with someone on shifting their diet in order to reduce the insulin resistance first, so that they can better handle and navigate a longer period of time in between feedings. Folks who are struggling with that kind of initial to moderate stages of metabolic dysfunction are not going to be able to do that, because their blood sugar is going to precipitously fall and they're going to get lightheaded and dizzy and have crying jags. These are people who carry food in their purse or in their gym bag all the time. They get not just hangry, but like really upset and stressed. And that's because we need to work, first of all, on some of the hyperinsulinemia before we shift the food. But overnight fasting is a great place to start, right? It's got to be approachable. I think in terms of food choices, we can make ways of eating really complicated. Sure, an elimination diet could be great, but for most people who are first approaching shift in diet, that feels totally overwhelming. I recommend just starting with eliminating all grain flours and all added sugars and sweeteners. And then when they're ready, eliminating all fruit juices and eliminating all grains entirely, right? As a way of shifting the insulin resistance over time. Now, the vast majority of people will eventually be able to add back some degree of grains in limited portions, but I've had amazing success with helping people to reverse this dynamic and really start to jumpstart some weight loss by simply extending the overnight fasting window, eliminating sugars and sweeteners and grain flours, and then after a week or so of that, taking out all grains and taking out fruit juice, but encouraging them to eat whole natural fruits, of course, in order to begin to shift the dynamic in the body and create some traction with regard to a shift. And the overnight fasting window is naturally going to help them to start to emphasize some more fatty acid oxidation overnight as well. And so that will help to create a little bit more metabolic flexibility as well. So I think it's important that we consider not too much too fast. Inside of that, there are all sorts of things that will work, right? Some people really like having that big, huge, large breakfast first thing in the morning that anchors them. And then they have their last day's fuel at like 4 in the afternoon. And they're good. Other people prefer to fast until like 11 in the morning or noon. And then they have a huge lunch and then maybe a snack in the afternoon. And then they eat with their family at the normal dinner time. That's sustainable, right? We have to be careful to not get too rigid in saying there's one right way to do this. Because again, if it's not sustainable, people aren't going to do it. They're not going to pursue it. They may nod and smile, but they're not actually going to be able to sustain it. And so I think we want to be cautious about sustained fasting, right? So it's my clinical experience that women in particular do really well with extended overnight fasting. Men, as they get more comfortable with that, may feel more comfortable doing like a single, like maybe every Friday as a water fast type of thing, right? A single day fast. But I really want all of us to understand that one of the best ways to mobilize toxins in order to promote detoxification is to fast for extended periods of time. And so this is not something you do from a place of disease. I don't recommend that at all. When you are suspicious of significant toxicity because of prior exposure or other symptoms, or in particular in cases of like autoimmune disease, because you can level someone who has autoimmune flares or actually create a whole secondary autoimmune dynamic by mobilizing too many toxins at once and putting them back in circulation and creating an inflammatory storm. And so I believe strongly that promoted detoxification, right? Enhanced detoxification should come from a place of strength and stability wherever possible so that the body navigates it well and it doesn't actually end up becoming part of disease promotion in and of itself. There's so much that we could talk about on this particular topic. Food sensitivities promote overweight. I'm passionate about this one myself because until I knew that I had a lifelong dairy allergy and sensitivity, right, both IgE and IgG mediated, I struggle with all sorts of histamine and pro-inflammatory related symptoms, and I cut dairy out of my diet 100% cold turkey, and I lost 20 pounds without changing anything else in a little more than a month. And got huge relief from my symptoms. And I don't necessarily say that's the common experience for everyone because I already had a very healthy lifestyle as a backbone to that. But it certainly speaks to, again, when you are doing something, whether it's a lot of emotional stress or being exposed to a lot of toxic chemicals or eating foods that your immune system thinks is a foreign invader, is a threat, meets the immune loss of tolerance definition of stranger and danger, right? Which, yeah, it could be a pathogenic bacteria. It could also be a food. An everyday food, it is going to react in a pro-inflammatory way, and sustained inflammation naturally promotes overweight, naturally promotes excessive adipose tissue. We talked in a prior Facebook Live about adipose tissue actually serving as depot storage for toxins. An awful lot of the toxins that we're exposed to on a day-over-day basis are lipophilic in nature. The body will be happy to store them in adipose tissue in order to get them away from vital organs and glands if our detoxification pathways are overloaded and not able to adequately handle the current load of toxic exposure. And drugs can further impair that because, of course, drugs can be incredibly beneficial and maybe even life-saving, but drugs are toxins, and so drugs use detox pathways. And if pathways are being monopolized with drugs, it naturally impairs people's ability to use those same pathways to clear toxins, and over time can contribute to toxin storage. And so adipose tissue, in terms of prior life toxic exposure, one of the most important pearls is that anytime you're going to think about supporting someone to lose significant weight, right? Let's say, 15 pounds or more, right? Please make sure that you're supporting detoxification before you go to make interventions that are going to promote weight loss. Open up the detox pathways first. Good hydration, healthy supported kidneys, no constipation, good GI motility, right? Good levels of soluble fiber in the diet, maybe even taking a supplemental toxin binder, right? That, has, different types of clay or activated charcoal, for example, right? Things that can be taken on an empty stomach, especially overnight, in order to bind with toxins to ensure their excretion in the stool, rather than promoting retoxification via bile reabsorption, because 95% of the bile or more that comes through the GI tract gets reabsorbed. And if the toxins that are coming through the hepatobiliary system are not well bound with another escort to exit the body, we're just going to reabsorb them. And there's lots of people retoxifying themselves on a regular basis. And so this is where we want to promote phase 3 detox. We want to promote clearance, both from a GI tract as well as a kidneys, and also cellular exit, cellular excretion pathway first, and then support phase 1 and phase 2. Address those first, so that if a person starts to lose weight successfully and toxins are being freed, they are much less likely to have a symptomatic pro-inflammatory response as a result of that weight loss, creating a yo-yo type of effect because of transient increases in inflammation that just sends them on a revolving door of obesity and an awful lot of frustration. So I'm going to stop it there. I want to thank all of you so much for joining me today. I could keep talking about this for hours. I'm sure a lot of you have other follow-up questions. As always, those are more than welcome here in the thread underneath this video. As soon as I finish, this recording will post up here in our our Facebook page, but please remember to enter the drawing. I don't want you to miss the opportunity to perhaps win a free deep dive clinical course at the School of Applied Functional Medicine. So I want to thank you all so much for joining me. If you haven't yet, please share the wealth of this information with your audience here on Facebook, so other healthcare practitioners, other empowered patients and clients can learn from this information, can get educated, inspired, and empowered in order to take back their health and actually make changes that are much more likely to have lasting results. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next month. Have a great day.